Since last month's tragic death of an 11-year-old autistic boy in Calgary, there's been lots of discussion around a new type of alert system. Parker Wells wandered away from his day home on July 16th, but only after the province granted an exception in Parker's case due to the specific circumstances. Advocates are now calling for an Indigo Alert geared toward cases involving children who are neurodivergent. Mike Lake is the Conservative MP for the Alberta riding of Leduc-Wetaskiwin. More importantly, he is dad to his autistic son, Jaden. Mike, welcome and thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Okay, so first, what were some of the thoughts running through your mind when you first heard that an autistic boy who was nonverbal had gone missing in Calgary?
Well, it's a flashback, I think, for any parent of a particular person with autism in a sort of particular range on the autism spectrum. So my son is also non-speaking and very prone to wandering, to exploring, and not noticing when he might be away from people. And so he's 30 years old now. But even now, you kind of have to pay real attention. He always has to be within sort of eyesight, because he is curious and he does love water and other things that kind of draw him. And if you're not paying attention, we just had a autism cycle here in the city on the weekend, and I thought he was throwing some garbage away, and he went to a different place than I expected him to. And when I looked around, he was walking around a corner behind some trees that I hadn't noticed. So even now, it's something that's always on our minds. And so when I first heard about this situation, that's where my mind went, was just thinking about what the family would be going through at that moment in time. And it's just heartbreaking.
Oh my gosh, heartbreaking indeed. So your son is now 30 years old. Maybe talk about some of the issues that parents face, especially with a young autistic child. And you're kind of explaining right there that even though your son isn't all that young anymore, you still almost have to treat him as though he is, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's less of a risk, I would say, than it was when he was 11 or 12 or when he was 5 or 6 or 7, because we've done a lot of work over time to help him to communicate a little bit more. And so less of a risk than it would have been when he was younger. But I'll tell you, Jaden has a visual memory, right? So he knows where things are. He can follow maps. He knows where the swimming pool is. But the abstract world, so that's the concrete world where Jaden's really strong. The abstract world, like understanding danger, like traffic or water hazards or big dogs, those kind of things, that's a world that Jaden doesn't fully understand the way that we understand it. So he's particularly vulnerable, and many kids on the autism spectrum are particularly vulnerable because of that same sort of differentiation, that real understanding of what they want and knowledge of maybe where that thing is that they want, but that lack of understanding of when they might be in trouble.
Yeah, I understand that a lot of kids with autism, as many children are in general, drawn towards water.
Yeah.
Have
Yeah,
you
the
found
way
that?
Jaden is as well. And the way that I heard somebody describe it, there's a few different things, but you think autism is very sensory, right? So the water, I heard one person who was able to articulate what it was like, say that the water is the one place that they felt like they were kind of in control of their body. There's like a pressure that kind of slows everything down. And that was how one person explained it. But certainly with my son, that is absolutely the case, 100% drawn to water. And we've had a couple of incidences where, 3 incidences that I can think of right off the bat, where when he was younger, when he was 3, I think he walked out of a cabin that we were staying at, and a neighbor knocked on the door. He was sleeping in a room with his grandmother, and no one noticed that he'd walked out. A neighbor knocked on the door at 7 a.m. and had found him walking down by the shore of the lake we were at. Another time when he was about 9, we were visiting some friends in the Toronto area, and they had a pool in the backyard. And Jaden had gotten out the door. We had kind of noticed that he'd gotten out the door, but very quickly he walked over to the pool, which had a tarp on it, and he stepped on top of the tarp. And I don't know exactly what he was thinking or what caused him to step on top of a tarp on a pool that was closed. But thankfully, we're watching out the window. And Jaden can swim, but obviously, you could understand the danger if a kid stepped on the tarp and got tangled up in the tarp. So, and another thing happened when he was older, just wandering down around Penticton and kind of got away in a moment when I think it oftentimes can happen when there's multiple people around and each person thinks the other person has him. That can be a little bit confusing. So
that does happen
the
a
water,
lot,
for whatever reason, is a challenge.
Yep, and it's even more scary when they are non-verbal on top of that, because they may find themselves in a situation and they don't even holler out.
Yeah, and that would be with Jaden. That would absolutely be the case, is that he wouldn't say anything. If someone asked him about where, who he was, or asked, he couldn't answer. And even though he can type things into a phone, we have an emergency number on the screenshot on his phone. So when his phone's locked, the person that found him, if they looked at the phone, would see that phone number to call. So that's one thing. And of course, we track his iPhone. But he's not every kid will wander around with a phone. Some kids don't want to have a phone with them. You could talk about wearable devices to track, but wearable devices can be tricky with a kid that is, that doesn't like the sensory feeling of certain types of textures or things on him that he's not used to, or her that they're not used to. And so there's solutions, but there's challenges around every corner with all of the solutions.
Okay, yes, because I've interviewed another mother of an autistic child who said that he hates the feeling of pants on his legs. So that's really making a lot of sense when you're saying even the feeling of a phone in their hand. It's so interesting. Getting back to Parker for just a moment here, Mike, in his case, he obviously got so much attention, mostly due to the fact that I think that he went missing in such a large city, and he got an Amber Alert after being granted an exception. But Parker is not the only autistic child in Alberta who went missing in under a year, unfortunately. Last summer, here in southern Alberta, Darius McDougall, who was a 5-year-old nonverbal, neurodivergent child, he went missing in the Crow's Nest Pass while he was camping with his family members. There was no alert system out at all in his case, and he has still never been found.
Yeah, sadly, it's very common. It's surprisingly common in all parts of the world. But you would think if you were to look at North America wide, we're talking in the dozens of people with autism who have wandered away and sadly passed away. And sometimes you get a good result and kids are found. Usually in those cases, there's a quick response by people who understand the person and what might draw that person and what their patterns might be. With Parker's situation, it's sad that that an alert didn't go out sooner, because I thought, observing it as a parent, once I knew about the situation, I thought the Calgary police did a really good job of posting on social media all sorts of videos that would help people that were looking to understand what to do and what not to do in Parker's unique situation, because that's critical, that people understand that one child or one person with autism might respond in a completely different way than another person does. In Jaden's case, you could call his name, and that would be a good strategy in Jaden's case. Not necessarily that he would come, but he might. And in Parker's case, the advice was not to do that he might not want to be around a stranger or whatever the case might be. So really, if we had a faster response, we don't know exactly what the outcome would have been, but if we'd had a faster response, certainly there would have been a better chance that Parker would have been found. And now the focus has to be on how do we ensure that we give the next time this happens, because it will happen again, that a person wanders away, that we have a better outcome, that we have a better response using what we've learned and what we probably should have learned before now.
100%. And we have a Calgary woman named Jennifer Ball who has started, she's put out a petition asking for special federal alerts to be put out and sent out in cases of missing children at risk because of medical, developmental, or communication challenges. And the petition has more than 38,000 signatures already. So what's your reaction to this?
That's so important. Jennifer and I have spoken, and multiple times, even this morning. And we need to work together. We need to, families know how important this is, and now, because of this tragic situation, more Canadians are aware of the real dangers facing a certain subset of the autism spectrum, folks on a certain subset of the autism spectrum. And I think that gives us the opportunity at this point in time, while this is fresh on the minds of Canadians, to drive a conversation that needed to happen a long time ago, but now hopefully we can continue to push for some change. And what Jennifer's doing is so important with a whole network that they've built out across the country of folks advocating for this. We've engaged the Autism Alliance of Canada and other organizations, and I've spoken personally with the minister in charge of emergency preparedness and in charge of these systems at a federal level. And hopefully we can get some swift action to ensure that the next time this happens, we're better prepared for it.
Yeah. I understand that you and Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre have also sent a letter to the government looking for similar changes to what Jennifer is looking for. So in the letter, I believe you say that Parker's death has exposed a serious gap in how Canada responds when vulnerable children go missing. So what is the gap, in your opinion?
Well, first of all, I'll say that Pierre and I are both parents of kids who would be in that category of kids who are prone to wander. His daughter Valentina is much younger than Jaden, and so it's our lived experience that there's that challenge. I think we want to see, obviously we want to see the alert system changed so that when someone particularly vulnerable goes missing, who isn't abducted, right? Like, it's important that it applies to people that aren't abducted, which is where the guidelines are now, that right away a warning goes out. And obviously we have to be careful, because we don't want to have alert fatigue. We don't want people ignoring alerts. So I think that that's an important part of the conversation, is what is the threshold. But certainly we can all agree that in Parker's situation, and in many people like Parker's situation, an alert should go out. And it needs to go out immediately, because that window of time in the first hours is absolutely critical, right? But in addition to that, we want to talk about law enforcement and better conversations with law enforcement to ensure just people understand the unique situation that might exist. We saw the Calgary police, their efforts, once the alert went out, their efforts seemed to indicate that there was a real effort to understand Parker's unique situation. I think that that's just an awareness thing, a training thing that needs to happen across the country. And certainly we do want to look at other things that might help, like tracking technology for voluntary tracking technology. So, in Jaden's case, tracking his phone, but if there was a way to attach a AirTag or something like that to particularly vulnerable people, so that you could, but you have to do that carefully, and having a conversation about how to do that in a way that respects privacy, but also recognizes those unique challenges. There's lots of conversations that here's the beauty of this right now, is that this isn't a partisan issue.
True.
Pierre and I have had great conversations about moving forward. We've had really good, really productive conversations with stakeholders from across the political spectrum, and I've had a good conversation with the Liberal minister as well. So this is an issue that I think that should bring us together, just like you saw that it brought Calgarians together in that circumstance. And hopefully this will be something that we can come up with something that the world looks at as a leading solution to an issue that really exists all across the globe.
Absolutely. Well said. I believe, like in any missing persons case, they always say the first 48 hours is the most critical. In this case, when it comes to children, we're talking minutes. In Parker's case, I believe that Amber Alert didn't go out for 48 hours. Am I correct? Because they had to get that special, I guess, circumstance.
Clearly a flaw in the system, right? Clearly a flaw in the system. And we just need to remedy that.
Well said. Mike Lake, thanks so much for joining us today. Really appreciate having you on.
Thanks for having me.